Welcome back. So you've brought us some really intriguing material today. This document, the attached text, it seems to map out a potentially powerful new way to approach learning and improving healthcare.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Our mission then is to really dive into this framework, this whole interconnected idea you mentioned. It feels like it's built around real patients.
Exactly. That's the core. It's not just one thing. It's described as a whole, a learning and care ecosystem. And patient experience is right at the heart of it. It's quite a layered concept, actually.
Okay, let's try and unpack it. The first thing I noticed right at the start of the text was a glossary.
Yes.
Now, okay, a list of terms maybe doesn't sound like the most thrilling start, but it feels, I don't know, important, like a necessary first step, this linguistic foundation, they call it. Why start there?
Well, it's a really good point. When you're bringing together different ideas, different components like this framework does,
Okay.
and using specific acronyms,
Right.
you absolutely need that shared baseline.
Yeah.
It's about ensuring everyone, whether it's a patient telling their story or a clinician, or maybe even an AI later on, everyone's using the same terms to mean the same thing. Clarity.
Yeah, gets everyone on the same page from the get-go. And the text gives us a few examples. PaJR, CBBLE, CRH, UDLCO. They definitely sound technical, almost like codes. We'll obviously get into what they mean, but just seeing them listed up front signals that this needs sort of careful attention to the language.
Precisely. And that first one, PaJR, it really captures the essence of this whole approach, I think.
Okay.
The source defines PaJR as a patient journey record. So these are de-identified case reports submitted by users, but crucially, they include both the clinical history and the patient's own narrative, their story.
Okay. So it's not just the charts and the test results.
No, not at all.
It's the human side, the actual experience of being ill,
Yeah.
of going through treatment. That feels really significant, doesn't it?
It really does, because how often does that get lost, in purely data-driven discussions?
Way too often. You lose the nuance, the context.
Exactly. The text says the whole purpose of these PaJR reports is to stimulate medical learning and discussion precisely because they include that personal perspective. They're the starting point, the spark.
The real-world spark, yeah. Grounding it in lived experience, not just theory. Okay, so we have these PaJR reports, these stories. What happens next? How do they, get shared or used?
That brings us to CBBLE.
CBBLE. Okay, and the text says, pronounce it cable.
Yeah, which is quite a helpful image, actually.
It is. Like everyone's plugging into this network.
Exactly. The CBBLE is the case-based blended learning ecosystem. Think of it as the network infrastructure. The PaJR, that patient story, is like the data signal flowing through this cable.
So it's a platform, a digital space where people connect.
Essentially, yes. A space where clinicians, researchers, maybe even patients sometimes can engage with these PaJR reports. It facilitates global collaborative learning.
Global collaboration. But the text also mentions local action. How does that connection work? Learning globally to act locally.
That's the idea. Imagine a doctor, say, in a rural clinic, sees something unusual. Through CBBLE, they could tap into experiences from specialists maybe halfway across the world who've dealt with similar cases.
I see. So you get insights from a much wider pool.
A much wider pool, yeah.
Yeah.
Different contexts, different approaches. And then you can adapt that knowledge, those lessons learned, to your own specific local situation, your own patients. Sharing best practices, but more than that, sharing experiential wisdom.
Right. Tapping into a kind of global brain trust, but applying it locally.
Oh,
Makes
no.
sense. Okay, so the PaJR gets shared and discussed via CBBLE. Then the source brings in CRH.
Critical realist pedagogy.
Sounds weighty. He says CRH helps process it critically. This sounds like where the real thinking happens, the interpretation.
You've nailed it. CRH is the engine room for analysis, for deeper understanding. It combines two key things. First, there's pedagogy,
Which is
basically self-directed learning. It empowers the individual learner. They aren't just passively receiving information from the PaJR or the CBBLE discussions. They're actively guiding their own learning, asking their own questions, seeking out what they need.
So taking ownership of the learning process.
Exactly. And the second part is critical realism.
Yep.
Think of it like this. Healthcare is complex, right? Things happen for reasons that aren't always obvious on the surface. Critical realism pushes you to look beyond just what you see.
like the symptoms or the immediate events.
Yes, and to try and understand the underlying mechanisms, the different layers of reality, social factors, system issues, biological processes, all interacting to shape that patient's journey described in the PaJR. It's about understanding the why behind the what in context.
So CRH gives you the tools to really dissect the information critically, acknowledging all that complexity, not just taking the story at face value.
Precisely. It's about rigorous, contextualized interpretation. And that interpretation, that deeper understanding, leads us to the final piece. UDLCO?
UDLCO. User-Driven Learning Community Ontologies. Okay, that definitely sounds technical. What are these organized, reusable knowledge structures? Is this where it all gets, like, cataloged?
Sort of, but it's more dynamic than just cataloging. UDLCO. Yeah, it sounds like jargon, I know.
A little bit.
But the idea is powerful. Imagine taking all those insights gleaned from the PaJRs, the CBBLE discussions, the CRH analysis, and structuring them, organizing them into knowledge collections that are explicitly designed to be reused and shared.
So not just random notes, but structured knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Structured, they capture the relationships between things, the patient data, the insights derived, the interventions tried. Think of it like building a really smart, interconnected library from all these real-world cases. Instead of individual books, PaJRs, you're building the connections, the classification system, the Dewey Decimal System maybe, but way smarter.
A living library built from experience, okay? And the text mentions something really crucial here, that these UDLCOs can be read by humans and machines.
Yes, and that's where it gets potentially transformative, I think.
How so?
Yeah.
Bridging into AI and Web 3.0 cognition.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
Well, for humans, it means much easier access to this huge, growing base of structured, real-world knowledge. You can query it, learn from it efficiently.
Right.
But for machines,
Yes.
for AI,
Right.
it means AI algorithms could be trained and informed by this incredibly rich, nuanced, context-aware data drawn from real patient experiences interpreted through CRH. Not just dry statistics. Imagine AI that actually understands the context of care, not just patterns and data points.
Wow. Okay, that is a big leap. AI learning from structured human experience and critical insight.
It could lead to much more intelligent, much more human-centered AI in healthcare. That's the potential.
Right. So we've gone from the individual story, the PaJR, to the global network, CBBLE.
Yep.
Then the critical thinking, CRH.
Right.
And finally structuring it all into this shared machine-readable knowledge base, UDLCO. The source calls this whole thing a global local learning loop. Can you walk us through that loop again, connecting those pieces?
Absolutely. So, step 1. A patient's experience is captured as a PaJR, clinical facts plus narrative.
Okay.
Step 2, that PaJR sparks discussion and learning within CBBLE groups, connecting people globally and locally.
Got it.
Step 3, the information, the discussions, are critically analyzed using CRH to derive those deeper contextual insights.
The why.
The why, exactly. Step 4, those insights are structured into UDLCOs becoming organized, reusable knowledge objects.
Building the library.
Building the library. And step 5, this is key, that structured knowledge feeds back. It improves clinical decisions for new patients. It enhances education. It could refine those AI algorithms we talked about.
And then presumably new patient experiences start to loop all over again.
Precisely. It's recursive. It constantly learns and improves, fueled by real-world input and critical reflection.
It really does sound like more than just a new way to teach medicine. The text calls it a decentralized, participatory, recursive ecosystem for learning and care. That's quite a mouthful, but it captures a lot.
It really does. Decentralized, not top-down control. Participatory. Everyone contributes and engages. Recursive, that vital feedback loop. And crucially, linking learning directly to improving care. It's built on real data, patient context, critical thinking, and collective intelligence.
So for everyone listening, the big takeaway here seems to be this vision of a dynamic system. It takes real experiences, processes them thoughtfully through collaboration and critical thinking, and builds this shared, evolving knowledge base. It really moves beyond those traditional, maybe more static learning models.
Yeah, it's much more organic, much more responsive. And that brings us to maybe a final thought. Thinking about that UDLCO layer again, the human and machine readable part, just consider, how could that fundamentally change things? Not just how doctors learn, but how AI gets developed. Imagine AI informed by this kind of rich, contextual, critically analyzed human experience.
Yeah, moving beyond just pattern matching in massive data sets.
Exactly. And then think bigger. Could this kind of approach, decentralized, participatory knowledge building from real experience, apply elsewhere? What other complex fields might benefit?
That's a really provocative question. It definitely makes you think about the potential for these kinds of systems
Yeah,
well beyond just healthcare. Food for thought.
definitely.
Well, thank you for walking us through that. It's a complex but really compelling framework. We encourage everyone listening to mull over these ideas. Where else could collective intelligence built this way make a difference? Until next time.